thing about when you start enforcing boundaries that I have seen, and this is something, again, that you have shown me, is, like you said already, your confidence does improve as you start getting really comfortable with your boundaries.
Absolutely.
But your reputation gets better because you are showing up as your best self in all cases.
And you're showing up consistently.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how. Today, we're talking about why your boundaries aren't suggestions, how to communicate them without guilt, what happens when you finally stop treating your professional limits like requests for permission. I'm Tonya Kubo, joined by Gwen Bortner, and if you have ever felt like a pushover in your own business, this is the episode for you. Because let me tell you something. If you find yourself apologizing for establishing a boundary in your business, you're pretty much telling your clients, your team, and your peers that those boundaries aren't really boundaries. They're just options. So Gwen, I feel like, now, first of all, I know that you actually speak on the topic of boundaries in business. I have gotten to sit in on some of your workshops, but I feel like you do such a great job of explaining why boundaries are non-negotiable limits that protect a business owner's well-being in addition to their time and their integrity. So lay the foundation for us right now.
Well, and here's the thing. People assume boundaries are bad, but boundaries are actually good. And the reason is we all really want to know what our boundaries are. And that's why people push against them, is to figure out where is that piece. There's a great study, I really probably should find it and keep it as a reference point, that was done years and years ago with children in a play yard with no fence. And when the children had no fence, they all just stayed huddled together and they really weren't very functional. As soon as they had a fence, they were all, out to the corners doing everything, right? We want boundaries. We want to know what is within our play area and what is not within our play area. Where is it too risky? And so that's part of the reason we push boundaries, is to say, is it okay if I go out there? Is it okay if I do these things? And so setting boundaries for yourself first makes it easier for your clients to get the kind of thing that they want, because they have figured out how far they push, what are they allowed to get, what are they not allowed to get, all of those things. But the other piece for you is, by setting the boundaries, you also know what you're allowing yourself to do and not allow yourself to do, and to create your own safe comfort zone. So boundaries work on both sides, whether you're inside the fence like the kids or you're outside the fence like potentially the adults, right?
Yeah.
Where are you allowed to be? And so we think of boundaries, kind of only in one direction, but they're actually in both directions, and they're protecting us on both sides.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's talk a little bit about the difference between boundaries and preferences, because I feel like these get blurred. I'll give you an example. I think the common example we hear, right, it's the difference between, I don't work weekends, or I prefer not to have a morning meeting.
Right.
But like I have heard, for instance, I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, and they work in an office environment. They were really struggling to get a certain project done. And so I said, well, can you work from home? And my question was really like, would your boss let you take a day to work from home so that you could get this done? And they were like, oh, no, that's a boundary. And I was like, is it? And I think, what they heard is that I was asking them to do the project after hours or on weekends. But I'm like, I get you don't want to work after hours. And I also understand if the culture that you're working in if you took one day to work remotely, they would assume that you could then work after 5 and on weekends. But that's not the same.
Right. I can appreciate that in this particular case, they probably did have boundaries and it just wasn't clear what, the distinction that you were talking about. But boundaries really are, this is the way it is. Everyone knows it's this way. This is the way it's going to be unless I explicitly say we are changing the boundary for a period of time, whatever the given situation might be. But the trick with boundaries is you can't do that exception early. You can only do the exception long after the boundary is really, really well established. Because if you do it early, then we can't actually establish the boundary, because boundary is about consistency and being able to say, what are the things that I absolutely, positively want to be true? And why do I need it? Because part of it is I've had people set boundaries. It's well, I really just need to only work 2 days a week. And it's okay, is that actually true or is that just something you want? Right? And often they make the boundary so extreme that it makes it really hard to achieve. 2 days a week is fine if you aren't trying to run a multi-million-dollar business and, with no staff, for example. It's you can't do this. There's sometimes that the boundary and the reality just can't hold together. So it's back to, is the boundary reasonable? Can I hold it? And does it actually matter to me? Because that's the other. If it doesn't matter, then we're not actually going to hold it, because someone, somewhere, somehow is going to push against it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't matter to you enough, you're not going to hold it, because initially it takes a lot of work to hold a boundary. It really
does.
It really does. But after, it's surprising. It doesn't take very long for the boundary then to be held. It feels like it's a tremendous amount of work, but it's relatively short if you're consistent. If you're not wavering and saying, well, okay, but this time we cannot. This time we cannot. This time we cannot. And it's the issue I see with lots and lots and lots of issues with my clients is they know what they want the boundary to be, but they're not willing to hold the boundary. And then they're wondering why it's taking so much effort to hold the boundary. And it's because you're always reestablishing it. And the reestablishment piece takes effort.
Why do you think they don't hold it?
I think a lot of people, and we work primarily with women, and I do think this tends more to happen with women than men, is we have been taught that people need to like us. It's a systemic thing. People need to like us. And we think if we hold a boundary that someone's not going to like us. It's not true that it's, men never deal with it. That would not be true. But I think they deal with it less. They're less worried about not being liked. That's not something that they talk about when they're little boys. We want everyone to like you, little boy. But with a little girl, we want everyone to like you, little girl.
Yeah, well, and I think that, there are some listeners that are going to bristle at that statement, because I think there's a little bit of generational difference there, because I think there's certain ones of us, we want to be liked because we were told that's what made us good girls. But I think also there's women younger than me who have just been conditioned to be accommodating, to avoid conflict, right? You don't want to be bossy. You don't want to be a dragon. We've heard that before. A bulldozer. You don't want to be seen as difficult, because for some reason being difficult as a woman is seen as unprofessional.
Right. All of those things.
Right.
Really, but it's all part of the same systemic issue.
Well, it's all people pleasing, right? We are conditioned to be people pleasers.
Yep.
And somehow that ends up, I think, getting interpreted by our minds. I'm not saying it's conscious, that success requires that we say yes to everything.
Yeah. It's very much, I think, that, obviously we have some natural tendency to be more caring because we're the ones that get pregnant and we're the ones that will deliver a baby. We haven't got men doing that yet. And so that care piece is we want to make sure that we care for people. And I think it has gotten conflated with making people happy. Those two things actually are not the same thing. But I think our society has conflated caring and making sure that people are happy as a very similar kind of thing. And so it's like, well, but if I make them unhappy, then I'm hurting them. Then I'm not caring for them. No. Often by not making them happy, sometimes we're actually caring for them more. So the difference between being kind and being nice.
I was going to say that.
Do it. Beat you to it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think imposter syndrome plays into it at all? Do you think there's they don't think they deserve it?
I'm not sure if it's truly imposter syndrome, but I will say confidence plays into it. And so what I find is confident people tend to have less issue holding boundaries than non-confident people. And when I say confidence, I'm not talking about being blustery or any of the rest of it. I mean, it's just really comfortable in your own skin, comfortable with who you are kind of confidence, a very rooted confidence, not a like, oh, I can do anything, kind of a thing. Just really know who you are, really comfortable with who you are. And I have also seen the better you get at holding boundaries, the more confidence you create for yourself. Because what you start realizing is you can do it. So success helps create confidence, right? Is that like, oh, I can do this. And what you'll also discover is very few people, if any, will actually, kick you out of their life because you held a boundary. And it's like, oh, wait, these two things were not interrelated. They're completely mutually exclusive, whether or not someone likes me as a person and whether or not I hold boundaries. Now, there'll be someone, undoubtedly, who will be like, oh, well, if you're not going to do that, then and it's like, okay, well, they're probably not really a good person to have in your life anyway. So it's probably good as well.
Right.
This is probably okay that they have left. But the majority of the people will realize it's like, oh, no, this is okay. Right. And quite honestly, for other people, it's actually easier when you have clear boundaries. Right. I mean, it's way easier because you don't have to wonder what the response is going to be.
Yeah.
It's not like a roller coaster ride. It's not like, is it going to be up today or is it going to be down today? It's just, I know if I do this, this is what's going to happen. Or if I ask for this, I know what the answer is, 95% likely going to be. It simplifies it.
It really does. I mean, I think of, us recording this podcast, we know that we have to, because you travel and I travel for our businesses, our scheduling doesn't always align. And we know we have to work a few weeks ahead because if you're traveling, we'll miss some weeks. If I'm traveling, we'll miss some weeks. But when I'm looking to make up time, I don't even talk to you about Fridays because I know you work Monday through Thursday. So just like I try really hard not to record on Mondays because Mondays are not good recording days for me. I don't come to you and say, well, I guess we'll have to do this Monday, Gwen, any more than I would ask you to make space on a Friday because it's just not, it just doesn't matter, right? Because that's a clear boundary and it's been a clear boundary since 2022.
Yeah, it's been a very long clear boundary for me.
Right. But since I started working with you in 2022, it's just been a non-issue.
And at the same point, there's been at least once or twice when we looked at the calendar and I said, we probably just need to do this on Friday. Are you willing to do this on Friday? And you were like, well, but what? And it's like, nope, I know that that's what needs to happen. But because we're so clear about the boundary and that I'm being very conscious to say, we're breaking that boundary this time, you don't assume that now, well, anytime that we're getting a little behind, we're just going to put it on Friday.
Right. Well, and I mean, this just proves the point, right? It never occurs to me to ask because I know your boundary. Right. So it is on you to come to me and say, well, in this case, we can do a Friday because otherwise we're never going to get ahead. I also want to talk about, though, justification. So I'm just going to give you an example and I know that there's going to be somebody listening who's like a Gen Z, maybe Gen Alpha, whatever. I lose track of the gens, I'm not going to lie, who's actually going to die. And they are going to think that I am making this up. But this is actual real life example that happened to me when I was working in an office setting where we were trying to coordinate on something and it was going to have to be done after hours. And so we're trying, and I'm like, I don't have kids at this time. So I'm like, well, I could do this and this and this. And everybody is shouting out their time. And the time that works for everybody doesn't work for the one parent in the room. And they say, I can't get childcare at that time. And I'm not even going to tell you the gender of the boss because we all know the gender of the boss who says, well, can't you get a babysitter? And this woman says, no, I can't. My husband's on a business trip. I don't have a babysitter. And then somebody else pipes up with, well, so-and-so could babysit for you. Like everybody in here is deciding that this woman can work on this day, that she doesn't actually have childcare, and they're going to solve all these problems. And the person in charge is thinking this is an amazing example of teamwork. And all I can think about is, had she never opened her mouth about why she wasn't available? Because you know what? Nobody else was saying why the other times didn't work for them. They're just like, nope, can't do that. I can do this time on this day. So help us understand how to communicate boundaries without justification.
Well, I think your example is the perfect example, which is no one needs to know. Like we talk about all the time why I don't work on Fridays, but I don't have to justify it to anybody. I use it as an example, and so I can explain it and how I thought through it and why and all the rest of it. But if someone, and it's happened more than once where someone has reached out and I've looked at their calendar and, if we're doing like a coffee chat, their coffee chats are only on Fridays. Happens more than once. And like, I get that. And so what I will do is I will reach out and say, I would love to be able to chat with you. I don't work on Fridays. But I see that's when you have your coffee chats. And if you got that as a boundary, I totally understand. We'll, at some point we'll run into each other. We'll have a chat. Lovely. I don't tell them I need for them to change their boundary. I say, I respect your boundary. Your boundary is you do coffee chats on Friday. My boundary is I don't have meetings on Friday. And so guess what? We're not going to get together. Now, if they choose to say, oh, but I really want to talk to you, let's do it on Tuesday instead. I'll find a time. We'll do it on Tuesday. Lovely. If I really want to talk to them, I will say to myself, well, I'm going to take this Friday because this is the best Friday to do it. This is the best time to do it. And then when I talk with them, I'll let them know that normally this is not something I wanted to do. I wanted to do it this particular time. But in the future, if we're going to, continue to have conversations, I'm not going to be able to do it on Fridays. Right? So I'm honoring their boundary. I'm expecting them to honor my boundary. And like I said, I can choose to negate it, but I can also say, I'm not going to negate it, but I'm going to let you know what my boundary is. But I don't have to say why I don't have meetings on Friday. It's completely irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And as soon as we give it a reason, then someone thinks it's a problem to solve, just like your example. Because I don't have childcare. Oh, well, let us help you solve the childcare problem. Because I don't have childcare says, if you can get me childcare, I can come to the meeting. But that really wasn't what she was saying. She was saying, this is my boundary. I'm not doing this. Right? But as soon as we give a reason, it's like, oh, well, here, let me solve that problem for you so that that's no longer a problem. Well, my boundary is not a problem.
Yeah. Well, and I find also when, I understand that justification matters to a lot of people, but when we assert a boundary and we give a reason, then suddenly my justification competes against yours.
Yeah.
Right? It's my childcare versus your desire to go have a hair appointment versus somebody else's chemotherapy appointment. And like, that's not what we're in the business of. We we shouldn't be competing against what we all do with our non-work time. It's just, am I working or am I not working?
Right.
What have you seen? Because I know you work with a lot of people who come to you and don't have strong boundaries. And you work with them on how to establish them, assert them, maintain them. What do you see typically happen when somebody starts enforcing boundaries when they haven't before?
First thing is, it's hard because they think every time they say no, that someone is going to, run and scream and yell and lose their mind,
and call them names. They always think people are going to call them names.
Yeah. And back to not saying that no one will, because someone probably will, but they're usually the ones that were just waiting for the opportunity to call you a name, or already calling you names behind your back, but you just didn't know. I mean, these are not your people.
Okay? Yeah, this is true.
Right. So that's the first thing is it's hard. And the first thing you want to do is you want to justify it. You don't need to justify it. You can just say, going forward, I don't meet before 9 a.m. I'm just picking something random. And they can say, oh, but. And it's like, yeah, if you can't meet after 9 a.m. Pacific, then we're not going to be able to work together. And most of the time they'll say, okay, or gosh, I can't work, because they've got their boundaries too. So you're going to have to deal with the solving the problem, dealing with the boundaries, having the conversations, and then holding them. Because if you say, I'm not going to work before 9 a.m., it's like, oh, but I can only work with you at 8 a.m. Pacific, and otherwise I just can't do it. And you say, well, then I'm going to make the exception. Oh, what you've done is say, this is a boundary. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Right? And if you don't really mean it, back to, if it's just a preference, I'd prefer not to work before 9 a.m., right?
Mm-hmm.
Then don't call it a boundary. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the other. So the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to feel really, really hard. But back to, if you're motivated enough for your own reason, not for somebody else's reason, for your own reason, back to what is your real definition of success, right? It can become pretty easy to hold, but you do have to be consistent. That's the hardest piece, which means you're going to say no to some people. And every time you say no, particularly if you have been a people pleaser, you're going to assume that they are all going to throw a fit.
Yeah.
Almost none of them will.
And I think sometimes you read more into their responses and behaviors than there really is there.
You said this once, I don't remember where it was, but it was the most, well, not the most, but definitely in the top 10 things of the most amazing things you've ever said. And it was something about, when we read a text, we hear it in the evil voice in our head.
In the voice, oh yeah.
Thing.
Whenever we never read text, like you can't read tone in text, and so you tend to default reading it in the voice of your inner critic.
Yes. Same thing for this.
Mm-hmm.
Hear the response in the voice of our inner critic.
Yeah.
We do not hear it as the response that it is.
Right. I mean, so it's like, and here's the other thing, is a lot of people don't recognize that pricing is a boundary. I say, like, somebody says, hey, I want to hire you. And I say, okay, well, it's $500 an hour. And they go, ooh, that's too much. And it's like, well, it is what it is. And then they go work with somebody else. Like, I don't go, oh, they think I'm mean, or they're so mean. They don't like me anymore. No, it's just they did not budget $500 an hour for the service that they were asking for. Therefore, they went and hired somebody else. So it's not nice or not nice, but we oftentimes don't think about the price of our service or our products as being a boundary, but that's one example of a boundary. Another example of a boundary would be a brick and mortar shop's open and close times.
Right.
So,
and I've seen shops that don't hold those well, and then they wonder why they're paying overtime all the time.
Right.
And it's like, because you've trained them that boundary is not a boundary.
Exactly. Which is why a lot of times, I've just been recently made aware of this, but I think it's because I've been making later in the day appointments where we close at 5, but you have to be inside our shop by 4:15 if you want to be helped, because that's when we take our last new customer. And it's like, that makes perfect sense. So one is, it's hard. Sometimes people may push back, but something that we talked about before recording that I think is important to unpack here is, we've both seen it. Sometimes you attract better clients.
You totally attract better clients because they match what your boundaries are, right? It's completely related to pricing. You don't get people who are going to try and argue with you about every penny if they know that this is the price, this is what the price is, this is what is always the price. But if you've changed it 5 or 6 times, then they're going to say, well, but maybe I can get this. Can we do this instead? Can we, and so you're fighting that energy all of the time. Back to when you're consistent. Had a client a number of years ago who did speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking, and she was talking about preparing the proposals. And she said, it takes me, all this time. And I was like, why does it take you so long to write a proposal? And she said, well, I have to think about whether or not they can afford it and what they can afford. And I want to make sure that I price it within their price range, but I don't want to price it too low. And I was like, what? Wait. And I said, how much do you actually want to make for one of these types of talks? And, she gave me a number, which was a completely reasonable number for the type of thing that she did. And I said, so that's your price. And she said, but what if they could pay twice as much? And I said, would you go to the buffet and eat all the food just so that you could eat all the food? And she's like, well, no, that would be rude. And I was like, this is the same thing. You don't need to take all of their budget just because you can. Now, at some point, you may raise your price, and then you'll get that. But at the same point, you don't need to cut your price because somebody wants you at a lower rate because they're not a good fit. Right. And this is, like you said, it's a boundary. Once she did that, she didn't have anybody kicking the tires and spending lots of time. They just knew what the price was. It's like, don't make it a big secret. Just know what the price is. And if you're in their budget, great. And if they're not, great. I had another friend, similar kind of situation, that she said, this is my price. And they said, oh, well, that's more than we can afford for this event. But it's what we pay our keynote speaker for our bigger event. So what happened is, instead of getting a little tiny stage, she got a bigger stage because she had the boundary. Back to much better client.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing is true with my clients. You have said it many times. I agree. I have amazing clients. But part of the reason I have amazing clients is because they all know what my boundaries are and they all honor my boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and the other thing about when you start enforcing boundaries that I have seen, and this is something, again, that you have shown me, is, like you said already, your confidence does improve as you start getting really comfortable with your boundaries.
Absolutely.
But your reputation gets better because you are showing up as your best self in all cases.
And you're showing up consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only doing the things that you really want to be doing. You're only doing the things that you actually excel at. You're only doing the things that you have time for. It's all of those things so that you're able to show up, as you said, as your best self consistently. Mm-hmm. So it's not like, am I getting the amazing Tonya, or am I getting the so-so Tonya? Or am I getting the totally bedraggled, barely can function Tonya? Nobody wants that, including Tonya. Right? I mean, nobody wants to show up less than their best self.
Mm-hmm.
But yet when we don't hold boundaries, that's what we end up doing. We're showing up as less than our best self. And then often what we do, back to, inner critic, we start beating ourselves up for not showing up as our best self. Well, there's no winning in that. Better to have not done it at all than have done it poorly and feel badly about yourself.
Right. Okay. So we've talked about the good parts of enforcing boundaries. So the flip side would be like, what is the actual cost of weak boundaries? Because back to other episodes we've had where, we've talked about like business owners not paying themselves enough or business owners overworking, in their mind, it's just on them. There's not really a cost. What do you see as the cost of weak boundaries?
So the first thing with weak boundaries, and this is one that I see a lot, is here's my boundary. This is what, and scope of work is a great way to think about it. Like, this is my scope of work. This is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. But I really, really like this client. And so I'm going to go above and beyond for this client because I really, really like this client, which can be fine. But when the boundary is not clearly defined and the going above and beyond is not explicitly communicated as an above and beyond, this starts to become the new norm. And then we go above and beyond that, and that becomes the new norm. And then we go above and beyond that, and that becomes the new norm. And all of a sudden, what they feel like is within the scope of work is nearly impossible to deliver on a consistent basis. Definitely not for the, the investment that they're making. We start resenting this client that we loved.
Right.
Because they're taking advantage of us. Well, they're not, because most of them don't realize that they are taking advantage because in their mind, this is all within the scope of work. Why would you be upset that you're only paying me X, when that's what you asked for? It's like, well, but that was for this other thing. And it's like, yeah, but you've been doing all these extra bonusy things. Why would I not think that was within the scope of work? Because you did it. Right. And so we can actually ruin our own best client relationships.
Yeah.
Our own boundaries because we like our clients so much. Right.
Well, and in that example, you're talking about scope creep, but I heard a whole bunch of other costs listed in there, right? Because there's scope creep, there's burnout from being overcommitted or resentment. You mentioned the resentment toward your clients. You eventually, too many clients like that, you start resenting your business.
Right.
And then,
well, you can't keep it up because you scoped it for, you've got 4 clients that each take 10 hours a week. But now you've got 4 clients that are each taking 15 hours a week.
Right. And what you also said, though not so explicitly, is you're setting precedents that are really hard to change later. Like, your point of, you're like, oh, well, that's not included in this. And they're like, but you've been doing it for a month or 2 months or 3 months. Like, what's changed? So, okay.
I want to go back to the original scope that I actually had to pay for. Well, whose fault is that? Well, that's yours. Boundaries.
Right. Yeah. So kind of just to recap, one of the things that you had talked about is, clear expectations prevent misunderstandings. Like, that's one way where those clear boundaries improve your client or your customer relationships. Clients respect professionals who know what they're worth, both in what the scope of work is, what the price is for that scope, all of that. The boundaries create a structure that makes working together easier. And, what I said is just you're able to show up as your best self when you're not resentful. And what you said is, and you're able to do that all very consistently. And that goes back to your reputation in the marketplace.
Well, and what we talk about all the time is sustainability, right? We talk about building, the business you really want should be a business that you could do day in and day out for as long as you want to be working. That's sustainability. And sustainability requires boundaries to say, I want to isolate whatever pieces of my business as my business. It's one of the challenges that I see when I hear folks say, yeah, I just took my email in, I took my computer in and worked on my email while I was watching TV with the family. It's like, that's a big, giant, flag for me. I start, it's like my eyes get very big. Because what that shows is either they're not focused on their family or they're not really focused on their work, which means they're probably doing both kind of poorly. And it's like, well, why do you need to do it there? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients who I could tell they were using their job, as their business, as a way to avoid their family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm not sure that's really a healthy thing to do. That's above my pay grade because that gets into therapy and other things. But back to when I would really talk about boundaries, what I'd realize is you don't want boundaries
Mm-mm.
because you don't actually want to have to deal with what the reality is of having those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
For entrepreneurs, one of the reasons they often fight boundaries, particularly around time, is because they don't know how to behave if they're not working.
Right.
They don't know how to rest. They don't know how to take time off. They don't actually have a hobby. They don't know the concept of a hobby, right? And so that's part of where the boundary, I said boundaries have two sides.
Mm-hmm.
There's the your side and there's the their side. And so other people will push against your boundaries, but the question you have to ask is, are you pushing against your boundaries? Why is that happening?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So that brings us to the end of our time together. But I'm going to say, if you're listening and you are ready to stop being a pushover in your own business, start setting the boundaries that actually stick, but you're not sure where to begin, we should talk. Especially if you already know that you're not using your business to escape your family, because that is not a business advising issue. That is a therapy issue. But sometimes you do need somebody outside of your business to help you see where your boundaries are too weak, how to strengthen them, and how to go about starting that process without damaging your relationships. And that is exactly what you could accomplish in a clarity call with Gwen. So that would be a focused conversation where she'll look at your specific situation, identify where boundaries could make the biggest impact, and give you a clear next step. So you can book that at everydayeffectiveness.com/clarity. Whether you work with us or not, you'll walk away with at least one concrete thing you can implement right away. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.